The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return.
Hello. Welcome to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. My name is Joni Siegel, and I'm the host for this podcast. Today's episode is episode number 230. Just a reminder to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and also find us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and give us a thumbs up. And if you ring the bell on YouTube, you will get notified every time we put up a new video. And I can tell you we put up a new video every Thursday evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So today, like most every other day, we have an interview. Today's interview is with a gentleman named John Mabry. John's story of addiction begins where a lot of people's end. At age 22, he was involved in a horrific car accident that claimed his right leg, as well as the life of his friend. This led to addiction, and his story is all about coming out of addiction, becoming a triathlete. Yes, you heard that right, a triathlete, and getting his family back and turning his life completely around. So without further ado, let's talk to John Mabry. John Mabry, is it Mabry?
Yes, it is.
Okay, John Mabry, thank you so much for being willing to be on our podcast today and share your story. Stories such as yours are so inspirational, even though I haven't heard the whole thing yet. I know because I read about you, but the hope is that a story like yours gives others hope. So thank you for being willing to share.
Absolutely, my pleasure. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. So well, and just to say it is what it's all about, but there are some who don't want to share their story, and I get it, and I understand it.
Sure.
But the value of a former addict sharing what they went through, I think I cannot stress that enough. It's huge. So take us back to the beginning. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? And bring us forward from there.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas, into an upper middle class family. And was surrounded by a lot of love, a lot of support. Pretty much everything I need, or not pretty much everything I needed, was provided for me, and most of what I wanted, or I had to work or I was encouraged to work to get what I wanted. So Michael Jordan tennis shoes that came out at the time, my parents were like, all right, you want some of those nice shoes, you pay for half of them. So it wasn't all just handed to me, but I did have a relatively easy childhood. And now, I usually share this later on in the story, but I'll just go ahead and put it out there now. Childhood trauma, and there's big T traumas, major, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, caught in a hurricane, natural disaster. Those are absolutely traumas. And then there's those smaller T traumas that a lot of people don't pay attention to and don't realize that can really set the tone for the rest of your life and how you deal with things. And so for me, after going through multiple rounds of treatment later on in my life, I went to a trauma therapist, and she came back and she said, look, I don't care about these major traumas that you went through in your young adulthood. She goes, what I care about is what happened to you as a kid. And I was like, what are you talking about, lady? And this is a phone consultation. I hadn't even seen her in person yet. This was just let's just get to know you over the phone, and then we'll bring you in. And I'd been to multiple treatment centers, and nobody ever asked me what happened to me as a child. And I said, nothing. I said, I had a great childhood. She goes, I'm sure you did, but what happened? I was like, man, the only thing I think of is I had some ear surgeries as a kid. But that wasn't a big deal. It was a long time ago, and wasn't a big deal. And she goes, no. Tell me a little bit more about that. And I said, well, I had 6 ear surgeries as a child, from probably about age 6 to 14. Had a transplanted eardrum. I had to be flown out of state to have somebody else's eardrum put in my head, and then the three bones in my left ear are prosthetic bones. And she goes, interesting. So when you come in, we're going to start with that, because I guarantee you that's where your problem started. I guarantee it. And I was like, what? It opened up a whole new world for me of, adverse childhood experiences.
John, I would say, just my own opinion, that's a big T trauma.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It was.
I understand, sexual abuse, and that's obviously horrific, but going through that many operations as a young child, that's a big deal. You have not only the pain involved and the trauma involved, you have the drugs that they have to use. You can't get surgeries like that without drugs. So I'm gonna change. I'm gonna change that. I'm gonna say that's big T.
No, absolutely, yeah, yes, no, I agree. It was big T. So what came out of that? We did what's called a graphic narrative, and I've never seen a therapist do this before. She's trauma specific. I mean, this is a lady that works with Jason Aldean and his team. As soon as they went through the Mandalay Bay incident, where the shooter at Mandalay Bay at Jason Aldean's concert there in Las Vegas, she traveled with their team. I mean, so this lady's like trauma specific. And she I think still works with them, if I'm not mistaken. But so yeah, we did what's called a graphic narrative. And so she sat me down when I went in there and gave me blank pieces of paper and crayons. I'm going, what? I've got a master's degree in counseling. I've done all this stuff in my life. And here I am sitting in this, cold red brick, office building with this crayons and paper. And I'm like, this is what my life's been reduced to. But what came out of that is I started drawing what I remember from my childhood. And there's always this fear, this, I'm not good enough. I'm broken. Something's inherently wrong with me that's unfixable, that I'm so bad that they had to put somebody else's body part in my head. And the doctor is probing into my brain. It was extremely traumatic.
Well, there's something wrong with me. Yeah. There's something wrong. And obviously it's not going away because I keep having to get surgeries to fix it. It can be, I would say, introverting or cause a lot of introspection that, you're not going to necessarily talk to your friends about.
No, what's funny is I covered it up. So I told her, I said, so in my senior year in high school at senior prom, I was named most outgoing, most school spirited, best personality, and class clown. And she goes, well, that's interesting because over here you're acting like this, but you're telling me you're feeling insecure, not good enough, broken. And so it was this overcompensation for the internal feelings I didn't even know that I had, but it came out in this over the top. I'm going to make you like me because I don't like myself. I'm not content with who I am because there's this internal angst that's always going on underneath the skin. So I'm going to cover it up by being funny and being over the top, Mr. Personality.
Yeah.
So anyway, great childhood for the most part, except for the ear surgeries. And I'm glad that came out. And I encourage people to, go talk with somebody if they have any kind of internal, and they're called adverse childhood experiences. If you wanted to Google, there's a 10 question questionnaire that the more adverse childhood experiences you have, the more likely you are to struggle with addiction, obesity, diabetes, all these other, secondary health issues. So I encourage people to look up adverse childhood experiences. And it can be something as simple as, I just didn't feel safe in my home. I didn't feel loved. There was times when I went to school, my parents didn't pick me up on time. And over, you got this message that was not intentional, but you got this message that you're not important or you're not good enough.
And, John, I agree with that. We have people who come on the podcast who maintain that addiction is a brain disease and that it's genetic. I never, I don't say, well, that's just not true, because obviously there's a lot of research that's been done. But what we've always felt here on the podcast is that drugs are a solution. They're not the problem. And so the problem can definitely be what you're talking about. And I think, so often it is some kind of adverse situation or adverse incident that happened, in young adulthood or childhood. I agree with you on that.
Yep. And I love the point that you're making there. That's not just a brain disease. I would love to speak with that a little bit more of the research that I've seen and the readings that I've done. That's kind of the message. So I am putting myself out there as a professional public speaker here very soon. I've done it. I did a few years ago working for a treatment center, but now I'm about to go out on my own. They're working on my website right now. My publicist is kind of, we're gearing up to be able to go share my story, nationally out with audiences. And so there's a couple of main points that I would love to talk about in a little bit once we cover the rest of my story, I guess.
Absolutely.
So ended up, graduating high school, and I was kind of riding high because I was, I felt like I was the guy, one of the guys on campus that was liked and valued, I guess. And so I ended up going to Baylor University for my undergrad in communications, and had a great experience in college. I loved the 5 years. I squeezed 4 years into 5 there, and I joined fraternity, and that got into the heavy drinking. So that's where it kind of started, but I was doing what everybody else was doing. Life was manageable. I was making grades. I was, working a couple of years through school. So by my senior year, what happened is I'd been on this trajectory of doing really great stuff. Life was exactly where I wanted it to be. So my senior year, I had secured a full ride scholarship doing video work for the athletic teams. And so I got the same scholarship the football players got. And
Wow.
I was filming football practices and games and baseball games, basketball games. And so I had, full ride scholarship. I had a monthly stipend I was getting paid. Books and fees were paid for, meal plan, classes. Everything was looking great there. I was social chair of my fraternity, so I was really great at going out and creating events with sororities, And then I was dating a cheerleader, one of the Baylor cheerleaders, who was also our fraternity sweetheart. And so I had set up senior year in March for spring break, set up a cruise out of New Orleans. So we all go, about 35 of us go on this cruise, out of this booze cruise. That was March 2000, and we go on this great cruise. Everybody's having a great time. And what happened? We're coming back from that cruise, and that's when everything changed. So nobody was drinking or driving. It was a beautiful day out. We were coming we'd passed through Houston, and we were driving back to Waco, and we were on I-40 about, an hour or so northwest of Houston. And we're in a friend's SUV, and the right rear tire, the tread separated off the tire. And if you remember, this was actually one of the Firestone Ford Explorer rollovers back in 2000 when they recalled millions of Firestone tires. This was before they announced that they knew about it, that they knew this was happening. So we were one of the victims prior to this being known to the public. So right rear tire blows out, and the car just violently starts shaking, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, no, this isn't about to happen. And it happens. As soon as we kind of drifted toward the median, as soon as we hit the grass, we did a 180 and then just started rolling. Witness reports say we rolled between 6 and 12 times.
Oh my God.
Through the median, across the other side of the interstate, missing oncoming traffic, and into a field. Car comes to a stop, upside down.
Were you driving, John? Were you driving?
I was backseat passenger.
Okay.
There was 4 of us in the car, and we all had our seatbelts on, thank goodness. Otherwise, we would have been, I've seen recreations of these accidents, and if people weren't wearing the seatbelts, they're immediately ejected out of the car. So luckily, we all had our seatbelts on. So we come to a stop, and I'm thinking, what happens in the movies when a car rolls like 10 times? It blows up, So I'm thinking it's going to blow up, it's going to blow up, it's going to blow up. So I undid my seatbelt, I fell, and I positioned myself on the edge of the windowsill, on the window, and to get out. And I looked down, and my right foot, the ankle had been severed in half. And so I was essentially standing on my shin, and my foot was wrapped around. I could see the bottom of my foot. And I just throw myself out of the car. I crawl out as quick as I can. I look back, and all 3 of my friends are still in the car. I'm thinking, man, if this thing blows up and I'm sitting here not doing anything, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. So I said, I'm going in. If it blows up, I don't care. So I crawled back in. I got a friend out, and my 2 friends up front were, Spence was tending to Ashley. Ashley was the driver, and she was pinned in, unconscious, couldn't move. So the first responders that came on the scene, they had to use the jaws of life to cut her out, and they're pulling her from the car, and she had a lot of head trauma, unfortunately. They landed a helicopter on the side of the interstate. This is stuff you see in the movies, car rolling, things going to blow up, helicopter on the side of the interstate. This is like battle scene, I felt like I was in Iraq, kind of thing. And they take Ashley off in a helicopter, and unfortunately she passed before they could get her to the hospital. And so her name is Ashley Furman. She was just 19 years old and a beautiful soul, and she was just unfortunately taken too soon.
I'm sorry.
But I ended up, long story short, I had 14 surgeries that year. I was under anesthetic 14 times for various nerve blocks and operations, trying to just piece my foot back together. And infections just kept coming back because there was so much gravel and grass and dirt, debris from the scene of the accident. Because I crawled out, I crawled back in, I crawled out again. So I just picked up all this debris, and it was just the infections. We could never really get a hold of it. So after a year and 2 weeks after the accident, I had decided to go and amputate my leg. It was in a lot of pain. I had to move home. So I moved from Mr. Social Chair in the fraternity, sweetheart, girlfriend, cheerleader, working, had a great job, and grades were great, to moving back home with my parents. And, one of the biggest real causes of addiction is disconnection. And there's many forms of disconnection. We can talk about that in a little bit. But for me, it was, disconnected from myself, being just completely traumatized inside from seeing all that, and then being disconnected from my friends, being disconnected from meaningful work, from the hopeful and secure future is another one that we talk about. Is I just didn't know what my future held, and it was so up and down that year. It was just one thing after another after another. I'd rather just cut the thing off and move on, where I knew what to expect, as opposed to the unexpected. I'd go in for a doctor appointment. Oh, we need to take you in for another surgery. So here we go. So the mistake I made was that I thought just cutting the problem off, cutting the physical problem off. The physical problem was my painful leg. Well, let me just cut that off and everything will be fine. So, right. And so I didn't deal with the internal stuff. You don't deal with the emotional turmoil. It doesn't matter what happens on the physical side. I've learned in my experience, it's still, I still had all that angst and fear and terror. I mean, absolute terror that I was going to die, and so I cut the leg off thinking I was going to be fine. But what I did is I just replaced, I just added the pain pills and the alcohol started to progress.
Can I ask you, John, where it's amputated, above or below the knee?
Below the knee, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, below the knee. So luckily, if you're going to lose a limb, do it below the knee. Not
okay.
An arm's a lot harder to replace because of the dexterity in the fingers, and they're harder to fit on. Above the knee, it's harder to fit a prosthetic on.
Yep. But you can use a prosthetic.
Yeah, so here's my prosthetic. I'll just
okay.
slip it off for you real quick.
Yep, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Just one. Yeah. Okay, so now you're compensating.
Yeah, so I go back to school, graduate 6 weeks later after my amputation, walk the stage on a temporary prosthetic to show everybody I'm fine and I got this. And I was just loaded up on pain pills and had been drinking like crazy leading up to that. I mean, it was not healthy. But you go, and the day before I graduated, I signed a settlement for several $1 million for the car accident, for the Firestone Ford Explorer deal. So you talk about life changes, leg amputated, graduate college, and you sign a settlement at age 23 years old, and they say, go out to the real world and go do your thing. I was terrified, man. I'll tell you what. I wish I would have had the wherewithal to just slow down, to just, okay, stop. Let me just, my life is out of control, or it's going to continue to get worse if I don't just stop and deal with what's really going on underneath the surface. So I wish people could hear that message. If there's something that you're really struggling with these days, if you got to just slow down. Don't go with the pace of the rest of the world and just keep going and thinking everything's going to be fine. If you don't pull the weed out at the root, it's just going to keep growing back,
Yeah.
So I ended up moving to Dallas for a year. I had a job, but I felt I wanted to go help other people through all the people that helped me through, my year of surgeries and things. So I ended up moving out to San Diego and started working on a master's in counseling at San Diego State. And although it was a noble field to go into, I never really saw myself as a counselor, like sit down and let's, lay down on my couch and let's talk. I just felt like it was kind of part of my personal journey. And what I did is I transferred all the stuff, the attention I should have been putting on myself to work through my own stuff, and I put that on other people. Or let me help you with your problem, because I don't want to work on me and my problem. That's too much work. That takes too much effort. So let me just talk with you about your problems. So I learned how to listen and be empathetic toward other people's issues, but I didn't listen to myself. So I had,
and you were still doing drugs.
Yes. So then it progressed to Adderall. I couldn't focus. So it was I was undiagnosed with PTSD for a decade. And, again, you don't have to go through the war in Iraq to have PTSD. It can be, any number of things. Yep. And so, and having PTSD has a whole set of symptoms and needs to be treated. And those weren't treated. And so I was covering it up so then I couldn't focus. So that's one of the things. Well, I couldn't focus because I was just kind of out of it. So I got on Adderall and I started abusing that. So what I would do is I would bounce from one substance to the other. I would get the pain pills. I would take all those really quickly and I'd run out. So then I'm on Adderall. I'd take those real quickly. I'd run out. Then I'm on alcohol, supplement that with some marijuana, being out in Southern California. So it was just this like revolving cycle of craziness, and I'd be up and down and up and down. But nobody really knew it until I got married. I married a girl I knew at Baylor. She moved out after my second year of grad school. I had 1 year left. And it took her about 6 months to realize something's not right. Because we dated and were engaged in 2 different states for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And when she moved in, she was like, wait a minute. We were just seeing each other on weekends and short trips.
Easy to hide it on little temporary visits.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, we weren't educated and didn't know about addiction. So we just went on about life, and it just continued to progressively kind of get deeper and deeper into the sickness. And I'm graduating grad school in 2005, and I got a call from my cousin who's an actor, and he calls me up and says, "Hey, look, I'm going to be in this television show on FX. It's based on the war in Iraq. I'm the lead character. It's the biggest role I've had to date. Could you help me take me through what you went through in your car accident? Because I'm going to lose my leg in this roadside bomb in Iraq." So I said, "Absolutely, I can take you through what I went through." And one thing led to another. They ended up hiring me on for his body double.
Oh,
and yeah. So
that's cool.
We have a similar look and build. And so, because I said, "What are they going to do for your leg shots?" And he said, "Well, I don't know, probably computer." And I said, "Well," he said, in the script, it was written right leg below the knee. So I'm right leg below the knee. They bring me up, check me out one day, the producers and director, and were like, "Yeah, you're hired on as a technical consultant." So I was like, all right. Not knowing what to expect, I go up on set every day for this 13 episode series, and we would do camera tricks where we'd slide my leg in on a scene to make it look like it was him. We'd have him trying to run, and he wanted to get back to Iraq and get back to fighting. And so he's practicing running on a track. And so we would have me doing the falls and, falling onto the mats and getting bruised up. And I was like, man, this stunt stuff is like a real deal. Like, this isn't a joke. Like, you can really beat your body up. So, I went from college, everything was great, to boom, everything got taken away. And now I'm coming back up. I'm building back up. The ego is getting built up. I'm thinking I'm invincible. And next thing you know, I'm in People Magazine and Access Hollywood. And that show ended up just getting canceled after one season. So I drug my now ex-wife kicking and screaming up to LA from San Diego and got an agent and started. Had my foot in the door, in the industry, using my leg. And so ended up working on projects like NCIS and ER and Cold Case and Superbad. I've got a scene, the kids, the younger folks would know, I got a short little scene in Superbad with Jonah Hill where I jog past him and curse at him as I run by. And so, I thought I was doing pretty good. Made it to the Playboy Mansion with Adam Sandler and Bruce Willis and Emma Stone for a party. And things were going pretty well on the surface. If social media was real big back then, and Facebook was coming up, but I would have been, look at me, look at me, look at me. But again, underneath all that stuff was just stirring and just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the unthinkable happened. I got a call that my brother, who lived in Beverly Hills, didn't show up for work one day, and he struggled with addiction as well as mental illness. Was diagnosed bipolar, and so I drove over to his house, and his car was in the driveway. I go up to his bedroom door, and the door's locked, and so I call his cell phone. I could hear the cell phone ringing on the other side of the door, and no answer. And knowing that he had addiction issues, I thought, there could be something here. And I wish I would have called for help, but hey, I got this, just my ego. I can handle it. And I ended up kicking his bedroom door in, wood splintered everywhere, and walked in to find my brother face down, dead from an overdose. He'd been there for 3 days. And that's what addiction does. Addiction wants to isolate us. It wants to keep us from help. It wants to keep us from the light. It wants to keep us from the love of other people and from ourselves and from a higher power and from God. And what he did is he just isolated. And we didn't, so coming from an upper middle class family, we didn't want people to know that we were struggling. We wanted to keep it quiet, and he was brilliant. He got his MBA from Georgetown, and graduated top of his class, University of Texas Business School, and he was smart. So we're like, we'll just figure it out, go get sober, but not knowing that he needed real help.
You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast, or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or call us at 727-314-7080. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and give us a 5-star review. Sometimes the hardest thing about getting someone into recovery is getting them to agree to treatment. Bobby Newman, a certified drug counselor with 30 years experience and an over 85% success rate as an interventionist, has created a series of 12 videos that you can use right now to learn every step to get your loved one to agree to treatment. Call 1-833-918-0008 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby. I'm so sorry about your brother. I mean, I'm super sorry. Did you know that he was addicted at the time?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. He had been struggling for years. And, so he was working in New York City and struggling with cocaine. And he finally told my parents. He finally came out one time and said, look, I'm in over my head. I can't handle this. So moved home with my parents to Texas for a couple of months. And I said, why don't you move out to LA and be closer to me? Not that LA is any better on the drug scene, but it's a slower pace of life than New York. It's, a little more chill, more sun, And so the great thing was for this last 2 years, we were 8 miles apart from each other. I was on the backside of the Hollywood Hills. He was in Beverly Hills. And so we got to be close to, he was there for my first son's birth and my first Father's Day with my son and things like that. But again, we just didn't want anybody to know. And so we just kept it quiet. And so what I tell people is that the drugs did not kill my brother. The cocaine did not kill my brother. It's the stigma. It was the stigma that he's weak. Our family's weak. My parents weren't good enough. They did something wrong raising us, that we're both struggling actually with addiction, not just him, but both of us. So we didn't want anybody to know. And so we let that stigma, and so after that, I ended up, things just got worse, of course, we moved out of LA. I said, let's just get the heck out of LA, but kind of like cutting my leg off and moving on, removing the physical pain of amputating my leg and moving on. You still got to deal with what's going on inside.
You're still not confronting the problem.
Yeah. Geographical change, as a lot of recovering alcoholics and addicts know, doesn't work most of the time. So maybe geographical change to Nashville, here where I've lived the last 11 years. And I struggled with jobs. I mean, I was drinking at work, drinking on the way to work, drinking on the way home from work, trying to just doing everything I could to cover it up. And my first big wake-up call was getting fired by Dave Ramsey. If anybody know Dave Ramsey, is the total money makeover, personal finance guru. Has a radio show, gets people out of debt. And it's real hard to get a job in his organization. At that time, he had 7 interview process, and it took over 3.5 months. And I had to go out with a spousal interview. My ex-wife had to come with my would-be supervisor and his wife. And so what Dave Ramsey says is every time he hates hiring crazy people because they take away from his goals and mission of his organization. And every time he hires a crazy person, he puts a new level of interviewing in. Well, I got through all 7 layers, had everybody fooled. I put on the act, played the actor, and I got in and I was drinking at my desk. I was drinking vodka at my desk, calling churches on behalf of his organizations, trying to sell live event tickets and popping pills as well.
Wow.
And so it didn't take too long for them to figure it out. And I got called into his office. And somebody that I really looked up to and respected, says, look, you obviously need help, and I can't help you in the way that you need help, but I can let you go so you can go get the help that you need. And so that being said, anybody listening that's had a setback, sometimes those setbacks are there for a reason. Sometimes if something didn't work out for you, there's a reason for it. And it could be a wake-up call for you to slow down and say, hey, you know what, I need to reach out for help. So finally went to treatment for the first time. And I was drinking within probably 3 days of that 45-day treatment. I went to a high-end treatment center out in Arizona and thought if I paid more, I'd get sober quicker and longer. But I didn't fully grasp the Alcoholics Anonymous concept, the 12-step concept. I thought if I went and got a bunch of therapy and got a bunch of acupuncture and massage and pool volleyball and all these things to kind of lift my spirits a little bit, then I would come home and I'd be fixed. But the problem is that all a treatment center does is give you tools and they introduce you to education, but it's the individual's responsibility to take those tools and implement them on a daily basis. And a lot of times on an hourly basis.
Yep.
And it's taken me 5 treatment centers to figure that out.
Well, and what finally was, as we say on the podcast, your point of no return? Because that kind of started the ball rolling, but obviously that wasn't enough of a point of no return for you.
So I ended up getting divorced 2 years ago, and as a result of just ongoing stuff, the ongoing shenanigans, and I had a good couple of years sobriety a number of years back, and I was working for an addiction treatment center, that had multiple treatment centers around the country. I was hosting their podcast. So here I am, been through multiple rounds of treatment, and I'm doing really well. Things are going really well. I'm sober. I'm sharing my message out with other people. I'm hosting a podcast, bringing on, high profile folks, and interviewing them on their stories. I'm traveling the country. I'm serving on addiction panels at conferences and doing some really great work, speaking to colleges and universities. But here's the thing is, so one of the big things that I'll be talking about on my public speaking tour is the unmet psychological needs that we have. And we have physical needs: food, water, shelter. And I got this from the author Johann Hari, who wrote the book Lost Connections. So this isn't something I came up with, to give Johann Hari credit. But in reading his stuff, he says, we have physical needs. So if I were to take water, food, or shelter away from you, we're going to see symptoms of that. We're going to see a decline in your health. We're going to see a decline in your energy. We're going to see physical, if you don't have a place to live, you're going to have, you're going to feel dirty and stinky, and we're going to see symptoms of unmet physical needs. Well, then there's the psychological needs of certainty, psychological need of variety and significance, of connection, growth, and contribution. And so although I was contributing and I was growing, here's the thing is I would come home to a spouse that if one person changes in a family unit, if one person is struggling with addiction or mental illness and they change and the other people don't change around them, that doesn't serve for a recipe for overall wellness for the entire unit. And so it's kind of like the mobile, like a kid's mobile, swinging above the crib. If you hit one item on the mobile, you hit the little giraffe, the elephant and the lion, everything's gonna move with it. And so although I was doing great work and I was had made progress, I was coming home to an environment that was very toxic and sick. And the other person wasn't willing to do work on their trauma. So I had caused trauma on somebody, on a loved one, on my ex-wife, and I was not putting blame on her. I drove the marriage into the ground. I'm not saying I didn't. But there was a responsibility on her part to also, I didn't cause my traumas, but I had to figure out a way to handle them. And now she's been caused trauma and there was no work being done there. And so it was not sustainable. Right. And it finally collapsed. And I take full responsibility for my part in that. And so I had unmet psychological needs, even though I was doing great and had built some time up in sobriety, is I didn't have certainty in my marriage. I didn't think it was going to last. And I didn't have significance in my marriage. I had no respect. I'd lied so many times and I just didn't feel like it was ever going to get better. And so my point of no return was not even just getting divorced, because I relapsed after that. Mm-hmm. But it was feeling so disconnected, so lonely, and so sad inside that I wanted to die. That I was like, if I just don't wake up tomorrow, that would just be so much easier. And so I'm living in an apartment by myself for the first time. I have minimal access to my children because of my past, and COVID hits, and I was depressed deeper than I'd ever been depressed. And I finally told a friend of mine how bad I was feeling. And he said, John, when you're sober, sky's the limit, man. You can accomplish anything you want, but when you're not, and you're not healthy, he goes, I'm afraid, don't make me show up to your funeral and tell your kids what a great guy you could have been. And it hit me. I mean, it was me sharing with another a friend who cared about me, who was in recovery, who I lived in a halfway house with. And he just sat there across the table and just said, do whatever you have to do, man. And so I took a step back and I said, something's not working. And one thing that I could change. So I have been through probably about 24 different types of therapeutic modalities. I've traveled to Bali and worked with gurus in Bali. I've been trained in transcendental meditation. I mean, I've tried all these things. It was still, but don't give up, guys. Don't give up. If you try one thing and it works for a little while, but it does, don't give up. And so that's one thing, is I didn't give up, and there's always hope if you keep. I still had power to make changes in my life, and so one of the changes I made was, instead of going to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, I said, you know what? I think Celebrate Recovery I'd heard about for years, and I never really committed to, and that's 12 Steps for Christians. It's 12 steps in the church. The same 12 steps as Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's just done with Jesus Christ is a higher power, not a God of a general God of your understanding.
I see.
And I grew up in the church, and my grandfather was a pastor, and so I gotten away from that. And through all the treatment centers, they always promote AA. So I was doing that, but it was like, for me, AA is, so I've listened to 2 AA meetings online this morning. So definitely love Alcoholics Anonymous, but I needed something different. And so I joined Celebrate Recovery at a church close to me, and it has made a huge difference. That's when things completely changed, is when I committed to a Christian program that worked with my values that I grew up with. And so we have a step study program. So there's meetings on Thursday nights, just a general Celebrate Recovery. It's like an AA meeting on Thursday nights, but I joined a men's step study, and there's 12 of us men every Monday for 2 hours, Monday nights. We do homework every week, and we come back in on Mondays, and we're working through the 12 steps together. Mm-hmm. So in Alcoholics Anonymous, you work the 12 steps with your sponsor. Well, this way you do it with a group. And so you're hearing other people's stuff on a weekly basis of what they're struggling with, what they're going through. And that adds extra motivation and encouragement for me. And then I get to add extra encouragement and motivation to other people. And so I was able to click and bond more closely with friends. I was able to get deeper relationships and accountability in this program than I was with Alcoholics Anonymous. And so that's been the biggest thing in my recovery this last year, has been Celebrate Recovery.
I think that's huge. And you make a very good point, and a point that we make often with our listeners, and that is that there is no one size fits all when it comes to treatment. I agree with you that you have the physical end, you also have the mental health issue, and then you have the spiritual health issue. And all 3 of them come together. And whatever program puts you in that place to where you can address all 3 successfully and come out the other end sober, that's what you do. And you know, a lot of people have done the 12 step. A lot of people have done, different rehab programs, but the point is you have to address all 3 aspects of it: spiritual, mental, physical.
Yes. And what I have found is once I have that consistent conscious contact with a God of my understanding, then the physical and the emotional stuff start to be affected in a positive way. So I pride myself on being a really active person. I've done, with my prosthetic leg, done triathlons and skydiving.
Triathlon. Okay, John. I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah. So, I pride myself on being an active person with a disability. But through COVID and my divorce, I was in my apartment with my blinds drawn. I didn't want to talk to anybody, didn't want to see anybody. I was just eating. Yeah. And I put on 35 pounds in a year. And I'm proud to say I've worked off 32 of it. But the weight, as much as I wanted the weight to come off, and I complained about it, I'm drained. I don't have any energy. All these negative effects of filling myself with crappy food and the crap I put in my body, I was putting out crap. Mm-hmm. But once that spiritual connection was established in the 12-step program that worked for me, I've dropped 32 pounds in the last 4.5 months. And I put in a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. I've switched to a keto diet, and I work out 6 days a week. And so
that I think it's amazing. And I think that your story is inspirational, and I'm super excited that your plan is to go out and share your story more and more with people, because, you have overcome adversity, and not just addiction, but many, many different things added on to that, whether it's the childhood operations or the horrific accident that you went through. And now the fact that you do triathlons. And I just think I'm super happy that you're going to get out there and start sharing your story in a very big way, because I think a lot of people need to hear it. I think that's huge.
Thank you. And, this go around, my ego is definitely more in check than it's ever been. In the past, it was my story. Look at me. Look what I overcame. But now it's like, dude, no, God has overcome God is the reason I'm here today, and I'm sober and I'm healthy. And it's I think the crux of the message I want to send out to people is that you, as an individual, you, the listener, you have control over, you have to take control of your situation. Somebody else isn't going to do it for you. I expected a therapist to do it for me. I expected to go to treatment and have a some kind of therapy from the outside of me changed me on the inside. And I had to do the internal work. And so you can do the internal work. You can ask for help. You have to be your own advocate. You have to be the CEO of your wellness, and it may not be, you may not be struggling with a drug or alcohol addiction, but you may be struggling with social media addiction, with shopping addiction, with food addiction, with sugar addiction. There's all these other ways that it comes out. And you've got to step up and say, hey, I want to make changes in my life. And I'm going to search for resources to be able to help me do that, because I found I can't do it on my own.
Yep. I think that's huge. And I think that, I think it's a very good point. You do have to be the CEO of your addiction, of your treatment, of your recovery. I think that's a very good way to put it. So John, if someone listening wanted to have you come and speak, how do they do that?
Yeah. So my website is not up yet, but it will be. It's going to be johnmabry.org.
Okay.
JohnMabry, MAB as in boy, RY.org. My social media is John Clint Mabry.
So in the meantime, they could reach out to you on Facebook.
Social media.
Okay.
Yeah,
John
exactly.
Clint Mabry. Okay,
yeah,
good.
JohnClintMabry on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Yeah, please reach out.
Okay. Great. I'm excited about what you're going to do. I think, and I'm excited about, your story. And I will also, when I do the video of this interview, I'll put up a little blurb that says, John Clint Mabry on Facebook, and johnmabry.com. And yeah, Can I
finish with one more quick story?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So as we talked about at the first of our conversation, that the biology, the genes and the biology part of addiction and mental illness is a fraction of the bigger problem. So there's only a small, and this is again through Johan Hari's research. He traveled 40,000 miles around the world interviewing specialists in anxiety, depression, and addiction. And what he found out was hold on, I just lost my train of thought. Let me come back. There is only a small percentage of people that it's solely biology, which is brain changes and genes. There are 7 other scientifically proven causes of anxiety, depression, and addiction. And they are, I got it written down here, meaningful values, a disconnection from meaningful values, from other people, from the natural world, from meaningful work, status and respect, childhood trauma, and a hopeful future. So if you are out there struggling, I thought a medication was going to fix me.
And I was just going to say, the one thing that will not fix any of those 7 points is a drug.
Exactly.
It's not going to do it.
Please hear this. If you hear nothing else, is that a medication by itself is not going to fix you. It can help you get through a tough time. And antidepressants, I was on them for 21 years. And through Celebrate Recovery and my work and connecting with my higher power, Jesus Christ, I'm off antidepressants for 5.5 months.
Wow.
And so again, it is a necessary piece of the puzzle for a lot of people, but don't solely put your reliance on a medication, because there's 7 other factors: meaningful work, status and respect, a hopeful future. There's these other elements of lifestyle changes that you have the power to change if you want to, that can help get you out of a tough spot.
I think that's great. And I would ask John if you would email me those 7 points, because I would like to reiterate them, because I think that, I think so often people think that a drug is the end all, and it's just not. Yeah, at some point you have to take action on your own and fix your life. And I think that's what those 7 points talk to, really.
Yep. And the medication may not be a pill. You may be using medication as sugar, as food, sex, dating apps, social media. So
whatever. It's something that you need to be control over. You can't substitute one addiction for another. That's never going to work for you. John, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I really, really appreciate it. It's a great story, and I know it's going to resonate with people.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the great work that you do. Please keep it up.
Absolutely.
All right. God bless.
Thank you so much for listening today. I think John's story is quite a story. I think I say that about a lot of the stories that we get, but there you go. They all are. And I think those 7 points he made at the end of the interview are very, very relevant, because while I don't, diss anybody for believing that addiction is a brain disease, the problem that I have with that is that sometimes when someone thinks they have a disease, then they don't think that it's something they're control over. And those points that he brought up are definitely something that you or the person that you know who's addicted can take control of and can change. So thank you so much for listening. If you are addicted, please reach out. If you know someone who's addicted, please reach out. And we'll be back again next week with another interview.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information, reach out to us on Facebook or go to www.theaddictionpodcast.com. Our email is theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com.